Welcome. Today we're diving into the life of Georges Bizet. We're going to explore his personal journey, his human story, and how it all connects with his music, especially Carmen, his most famous opera. It's a bit of a tragedy, isn't it? He achieves this phenomenal success and then dies so young, only 36, just as it's all beginning.
It truly is a story of huge highs and crushing lows, of a man grappling with his genius and, well, what the world expected of him.
We've got a lot of sources here, biographies, letters, even reviews from back then. Why don't we start with his early life? I mean, the child prodigy story is almost a cliche, but Bizet seems to, well, really embody it.
Absolutely. Just imagine this 9 years old and he gets into the Paris Conservatoire, a year younger than anyone else. That just shows you the raw talent this kid had.
I've read that he was picking up musical notation and complex harmonies so young, like incredibly young, even listening in on his dad's singing lessons.
There are stories of him playing back whole pieces after hearing them just once. That sort of natural, almost instinctive grasp of music is what set him apart.
And then at 19, he wins the Prix de Rome. That seems like such a turning point, sending him in a completely different direction.
The Prix de Rome, it wasn't just an award, it was a total game changer. A grant to study in Rome, time to experiment creatively, a chance to, immerse himself in the heart of European culture.
His letters from that time are really fascinating. You get a glimpse into how he was thinking, feeling. He seemed excited and, burdened by all the expectations.
Yeah, you see this tension in his letters, a real joy in finding new sounds, exploring new places, but also this pressure to create, to, live up to all that potential. He started so many ambitious projects, but just left a bunch of them unfinished.
That must have been frustrating. It suggests he had this, restless creative energy, maybe struggling to find his real voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like he had this flood of ideas, but hadn't quite worked out how to make them into, finished masterpieces. That internal struggle, I think, foreshadows some of the problems he faces later.
Should we move on to his return to Paris? It seems like a harsh change from the world of the conservatoire, going into the realities of the Parisian opera scene.
The opera houses in Paris, they were ferociously competitive. You had these huge names, Verdi, Meyerbeer dominating everything. It was really hard for a new composer to break through, especially someone like Bizet who, well, didn't exactly follow all the trends.
It seems like he had a bunch of jobs teaching piano, arranging music, even working as a music critic, all while trying to write his own operas. It's a long way from that peaceful time in Rome.
It really shows you his resilience, his dedication to music, even when he was struggling financially and facing rejection. His early operas, things like Les Pêcheurs de Perles and La Jolie Fille de Perth, they got a pretty lukewarm response. People criticized them for being too different. That must have been hard.
I found this story about his music for a play, Alphonse Daudet's L'Arlésienne. It's interesting.
Yes. The play was a total flop, and people initially dismissed Bizet's music, but then he took this failure, pulled out a suite of music, and, well, it became incredibly popular.
It shows that he could adapt. Find something beautiful even when things were tough.
Absolutely. The L'Arlésienne suite, it's a perfect example of how something that seems like a setback can lead to something unexpected and wonderful. It blends these Provençal folk influences with his style, lively, melancholic, deeply affecting.
Maybe this is a good place to shift to his personal life, particularly Geneviève Halévy, his relationship with her. She was the daughter of his old composition teacher. That adds an interesting layer to things.
It does. Their relationship was intense. The Halévy family didn't want them to marry at first. They saw Bizet as the struggling artist, not good enough for their daughter.
But he did win them over eventually, and they married in 1869. But from what I've gathered, it was a bit of a turbulent relationship.
Geneviève, apparently she was prone to being emotionally unstable, and her mother being around seems to have made things tense. But in Bizet's letters, you see real affection for his wife, tenderness.
He was there for her during the rough patches. That shows a different side of him, loyalty and compassion.
It reminds us that even the most brilliant artists have the same human struggles as everyone else. Their personal lives, just like their art, are complicated, messy even.
I imagine the Franco-Prussian War must have been a real disruption for Bizet, both personally and artistically. Paris, under siege, fear, and uncertainty everywhere.
It was a turning point, not just for him, but for France as a whole. The country was in chaos, and the war affected everything. Bizet joined the National Guard, like lots of people, but he doesn't seem to have enjoyed it.
His letters from that period, they're kind of darkly funny. He makes fun of the old equipment they had, says it was more dangerous to his own side than the enemy.
He definitely wasn't a soldier at heart. Music was his real passion. But even when he could have escaped Paris, he chose to stay. That says a lot about his character, loyal to his city, maybe even a bit stubborn, refusing to let the chaos mess with his creativity.
It's an interesting contrast to how people often describe him: temperamental, easily discouraged.
He was definitely passionate, but this period shows a different side. Resilient, determined to keep going even when everything was falling apart. And it's after the war, with Paris still recovering, that he starts working on what would become his most famous piece.
Carmen. But before we get to that, we should talk about Jamila, his one-act opera that premiered in 1872. Seems quite different from his earlier work.
Jamila is much more intimate, introspective, exploring ideas of love, longing, and sacrifice. The musical language is richer, more subtle.
But it wasn't well received either, was it? The premiere was a mess, with bad staging and singers who didn't really do the music justice.
It's kind of ironic considering how much trouble Bizet had getting his operas performed in the first place. It's like fate was testing him, throwing one problem after another his way. But he didn't give up.
Then comes L'Arlésienne, the music for Alphonse Daudet's play. As we talked about, it gave us that amazing suite. It feels like a turning point, where his unique style starts to get recognized.
With L'Arlésienne, he finally starts getting the praise he deserves. Its popularity helps him and leads to a commission for a new opera. And the subject, Prosper Mérimée novella, Carmen.
Ah, Carmen.
Yeah.
The opera that made Bizet a legend. But even this one had its share of difficulties.
The management at the Opéra Comique, where Carmen was going to premiere, they weren't happy about it. They thought the story was scandalous, passionate love, betrayal, and then death. They were worried it would upset the audience.
The character of Carmen was controversial too. She's a strong, independent woman who doesn't care about what society expects, embraces her sexuality, refuses to be controlled by men.
It shows Bizet's artistic vision that he didn't back down from these difficult themes. He saw Carmen as a chance to break away from traditional opera, create something truly new and daring.
And knew it was. The music of Carmen is incredible, full of melodies, rhythms, and orchestral colors. From the famous habanera to the Toreador song, it's packed with tunes that have become so familiar.
But it wasn't easy to create. The rehearsals were full of problems, the orchestra struggled with some parts, and the chorus was pushed way beyond what they were used to. Bizet demanded a lot. He wanted them to act, to really become the characters, to bring a realness to the stage.
So it's not surprising that the premiere, on March 3rd, 1875, got mixed reviews. Some people loved the realism and emotional power, while others thought it was shocking and immoral.
The fact that Carmen still provokes such strong reactions, even now, tells you how powerful it is. It challenges how we see things, forces us to face uncomfortable truths about love, desire, and what happens because of the choices we make.
It's so sad that Bizet didn't live to see his masterpiece become successful. He died only 3 months after the premiere, thinking Carmen was a failure. What an awful irony.
Can you imagine pouring your heart and soul into something, only to be met with criticism and misunderstanding? It reminds us that sometimes artistic recognition comes too late.
It makes you wonder how different his life and his legacy would be if he had lived longer. What other amazing things could he have created?
We'll never know. But maybe Bizet dying young adds to the fascination of Carmen. It's not just a work of genius, it's a testament to a life cut short, a reminder that we're all fragile. In just a few years after Bizet died, Carmen went from being controversial to a global sensation. Now it's one of the most performed operas in the world.
The change is incredible. What people saw as scandalous and too modern quickly became a classic. First, the strong female lead, the passionate music, the tragic ending. Those are the things people love about it now.
It makes you think, how would Bizet have felt seeing his supposed failure become such a huge success? He would have felt vindicated, I think, maybe even a little amused by the irony. But most of all, I imagine he'd be deeply touched knowing that his music had such a powerful impact on people.
There's something timeless about Carmen, isn't there? The themes, love, jealousy, they speak to everyone, no matter the culture or the time period.
And Bizet's music, with its unforgettable melodies and rich orchestration, captures those emotions so intensely and brilliantly. It's a work that goes straight to the heart.
It's fascinating to think about how different his legacy might have been if he'd lived longer. Would he have kept pushing the boundaries of opera, challenging conventions, and defying expectations?
We can't know for sure, but looking at his career, I think he had the talent, the vision, and the courage to truly revolutionize French music.
Maybe he could have even become as famous and influential as his mentor, Charles Gounod.
It's an interesting thought. What we know for sure is that Bizet left us a body of work that is both beautiful and innovative. And in Carmen, he gave the world a masterpiece that still inspires and moves us today, just like it did over a century ago.
It's a sad reminder that even a life cut short can leave a lasting mark. And for Georges Bizet, that mark is one of passion, brilliance, and an incredible ability to create music that touches the soul. He never got to see the full impact of his work, but Carmen's worldwide success speaks for itself. It makes you wonder what other hidden gems might be tucked away in his lesser-known compositions, just waiting to be discovered and appreciated. That's something to think about.